Captain Area Helix liked her coffee black, her space battles clean, and her music loud enough to scare small children, which was why she was particularly irked to find herself on the bridge of the fortress ship Harmonize, staring at a holographic projection of Graviton, the galaxy's most neurotic sentient planet. "It's like staring into the existential dread of a giant, cosmic eyeball," she remarked, swirling the last dregs of coffee in her mug. "Captain, Graviton demands an answer," said First Officer Riggs, a man with the personality of a malfunctioning android and the flexibility of a steel rod. "It claims Earth's music is a threat to its sanity." Aria snorted, setting her mug down with a decisive thunk. "A planet afraid of Bohemian Rhapsody. Can you believe it? In fairness, even I find that song a bit convoluted," Riggs replied, managing to sound both factual and like a complete killjoy. Aria gave him a side-eye. "Remind me to never let you DJ any of our parties." Riggs shrugged, unperturbed as always. "The Coalition has convened to discuss eradicating all Earth-originating frequencies, Captain. They say it's for the greater good." "The greater good of what? Galactic monotony?" Riggs maintained his stoic expression, which Aria found suspiciously effective at times. "I think they mean the greater good of not being driven insane by our music, Captain." Aria grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Oh, please. If they can't handle a little bit of We Will Rock You, what hope do they have against our real weapons?" The bridge crew snickered, the tension easing slightly. Chief Engineer Mako, a wiry woman with perpetual engine grease smudges and a wicked sense of humor, piped up. "Should we threaten them with a disco ball next?" "Only if things get desperate," Aria replied, her tone dry as a Martian desert. The comms officer interrupted the banter, his voice laced with urgency. "Incoming message from Graviton, Captain. It's not happy, because a giant sentient rock with emotional issues is just what I needed today," Aria muttered, before nodding for the message to be played. The bridge lights dimmed, the holographic interface flickered, and the disembodied voice of Graviton oozed through the speakers, dripping with melodramatic angst. "Earthlings, your cacophony threatens my cohesion. Silence it or face the consequences." "You hear that, crew?" Aria leaned back in her chair, smirking. "We've hit a nerve. Might as well strum a few more chords while we're at it." Riggs cleared his throat, a sound that usually heralded a lecture about protocol. "Captain, this is a serious diplomatic incident." "The Coalition can shove their seriousness where the solar flares don't shine," Aria interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "We're musicians, not terrorists. If a planet can't handle a little noise pollution, maybe it's time it learned some new notes." Mako laughed, a sharp bark of amusement. "I say we blast Stairway to Heaven next, just to really mess with its head." The idea had merit. Aria considered it a moment, then shook her head. "Nah, if we're going out, we do it in style. Cue Ride of the Valkyries, and make sure it's the version with the extra bass." The bridge hummed with excitement as the crew prepared to unleash Wagner's finest upon the fragile sensibilities of Graviton. Riggs, ever the voice of caution, tried one last time. "Captain, I must insist. You must insist on having some fun, Riggs," Aria countered, her grin widening. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" As if on cue, the ship's alarms blared, lights flashing a garish red. "Incoming signal from the Coalition," reported the comms officer, looking slightly green around the edges. "They sound pissed." Aria slapped her forehead, half in exasperation, half in amusement. "Well, there goes our peace and quiet. Patch them through." The holographic display now showed the commanding facade of the Coalition spokesperson, a creature resembling a cross between a jellyfish and a tax auditor. "Captain Helix," it intoned with all the warmth of a hypothermic glacier, "your actions are in direct violation of interstellar harmony protocols." "Interstellar harmony," Aria repeated, her voice dripping with incredulity. "Since when did we sign up for a cosmic choir practice?" The spokesperson's tendrils twitched in what Aria assumed was irritation. "Your music threatens the stability of Graviton and by extension the Coalition's peace." "Peace, huh? That's what you're calling this bureaucratic snoozefist?" Aria crossed her arms, daring the gelatinous official to argue. "Your insolence is noted," the spokesperson replied icily. "Cease your transmissions immediately or we will be forced to take action." Mako rolled her eyes, whispering to Riggs, typical. "Can't handle our rock, so they threaten us with theirs." Aria, picking up on the mutiny in her crew's whispers, decided to double down. "You know what? Tell Graviton to invest in some earplugs and grow a pair. We're not stopping our transmissions." The spokesperson's image flickered, a sign of its growing agitation. "Very well, Captain. You leave us no choice but to neutralize the threat." With that ominous parting shot, the holographic display blinked off, leaving the bridge in a tense, buzzing silence. "Oh great," Aria said, her sarcasm as thick as asteroid dust. "Now we've got a planet with a vendetta. Must be Wednesday." Riggs, resigned to his fate as the ship's voice of reason, sighed heavily. "What now, Captain?" Aria leaned back, an idea forming as crazy as it was brilliant. We fight fire with music, but first let's see if Graviton has a sense of humor. A grin spread across her face like a Cheshire cat on helium. Prepare to broadcast, I will survive. Let's see how this sentient whiner handles a little Gloria Gaynor. The crew exchanged glances, equal parts terrified and thrilled. Mako punched a button, her grin matching Aria's. Broadcasting now, Captain. As the familiar disco beat filled the bridge, Aria couldn't help but laugh. Let's give that planet something to really cry about. The ship shuddered as Graviton responded, its attempt at retaliation more akin to a cosmic tantrum than a calculated attack. Alarms blared once more, but Aria felt exhilarated, alive in the chaos. What's it doing? Riggs asked, gripping his console as the ship rocked to one side. Throwing a fit, by the looks of it, Mako said, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. Guess it didn't like disco any more than rock. Aria could barely contain her amusement even as the situation grew more dire. Guess we found its Achilles heel. Or whatever a planet's vulnerable spot is. The bridge crew held onto their stations as Graviton continued its tempestuous display, but Aria's confidence didn't waver. If music could bring a planet to its metaphorical knees, then maybe, just maybe, they had a fighting chance. The alarms finally subsided, leaving the crew rattled but intact. Riggs, ever the consummate professional, took stock of the situation. Damage report, Mako checked her readouts, smirking. Just a few bruised egos mostly, but I doubt Graviton's ego's faring much better. Aria stood, surveying her crew with a gleam of mischief in her eyes. All right, people, we've pissed off a planet. Let's see if we can keep the coalition on their toes. Start prepping our next set list. The bridge erupted into a flurry of activity, each crew member fueled by the high of their improbable success. Riggs, still slightly skeptical, couldn't help but be impressed by the audacity of their captain. You sure about this, Captain? He asked, still clinging to caution like a security blanket. Aria flashed him a devil-may-care grin. Sure, hell no. But if anyone's going to teach the universe a lesson in Earth's resilience, it'll be us. With that, she turned her attention back to the task at hand, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them next. The Harmonize might be on a collision course with interstellar chaos, but Aria wouldn't have it any other way. As the crew rallied around her, each one ready to play their part in the coming symphony of defiance, Aria knew one thing: they'd give those alien bureaucrats something to dance about. And if that failed, well, there was always the disco ball. Aria's grin barely had time to settle before the holographic display on the bridge crackled back to life. This time, instead of the Coalition's spoke squid, it showed a scrambled mess of audio and visual noise that looked like the universe's worst attempt at a modern art installation. What's this? She muttered. Did Graviton decide to send us its avant-garde portfolio? Mako, perched like a gargoyle over her console, squinted at the display. No, that's just Graviton's idea of a subtle message. It's like it got into a fight with a blender and lost. Aria took a sip of her coffee, grimacing at the cold dregs. Someone get me a fresh cup of motor oil stat, and Riggs, see if you can unscramble whatever that rock's trying to tell us. Riggs, ever the diligent officer, was already tapping at his console. Working on it, Captain. If I can isolate the signal beneath all this static, we might get something coherent. Coherent, from a planet with anger management issues, Aria smirked. Good luck. As Riggs worked his magic, the crew held their breath, every now and then exchanging nervous glances. Finally, the static resolved into something resembling actual speech, though it sounded like a kazoo being slowly tortured. Earth origin. Psychic disruption, frequency, network failure, came the disjointed robotic voice of Graviton, sounding like it was gargling gravel and having an existential crisis all at once. Aria leaned in, intrigued. Did I hear that right? Our music's causing a network failure, Mako snorted, giving Riggs a nudge with her elbow. Guess even planets aren't safe from the dangers of a good baseline. Riggs, undeterred by Mako's jibes, nodded thoughtfully. It seems Earth's music is interfering with Graviton's psychic communication channels. From what I can gather, it's causing massive disruptions in its network. Aria chuckled, a dark, mirthful sound. So let me get this straight. One of the universe's most stable planets is falling apart because it can't handle a little rock and roll. That's the gist of it, Riggs confirmed, his tone bemused. And the Coalition thinks we're the problem. Well, color me surprised, Aria said with a roll of her eyes. I always knew Earth had a knack for shaking things up, but this is next level. Mako leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, contemplating their situation. If the Coalition's truly worried about Graviton's network going kaput, they'll throw everything but the kitchen sink at us to shut us down. As if to punctuate her point, the comms officer piped up, looking like he'd just swallowed a live eel. Captain, we're picking up chatter from the Coalition fleet. They're mobilizing an armada, headed our way. Fantastic, Aria muttered, tapping her mug anxiously. We're about to receive a very unfriendly welcoming committee. What's the plan, Captain? Riggs asked, his voice steady despite the looming threat. Area stared at the holographic map, watching the blips representing the coalition ships converge on their location like a swarm of angry bees. We need to buy time and figure out how to turn this whole psychic disruption thing to our advantage. Mako arched an eyebrow. You want to weaponize music. Why not? Area replied with a smirk. If Earth's music can screw with Graviton's head, maybe it'll do the same to the coalition ships. Riggs, always the cautious one, looked skeptical. It's a gamble, Captain. If it doesn't work, we're as good as space debris. Area's grin widened. Then let's make sure it's one hell of a gamble. Mako was already tinkering with the ship's audio matrix, tweaking frequencies and adjusting the output. I've got a few ideas on how to amplify the signal. We might just blow out some eardrums along the way. Just what the doctor ordered, Area said, holding back a laugh. Riggs, keep an eye on the coalition's movements. Let me know when they're close enough for a little audio surprise. As the crew busied themselves with preparations, Area felt the familiar thrum of adrenaline in her veins. This was what she lived for, the chaos, the thrill, the audacity of standing against overwhelming odds with nothing but a mischievous grin and a kick-ass playlist. The coalition armada loomed closer, their sleek ships casting ominous shadows across the void. The tension in the air was a palpable, vibrating thing, like a taut guitar string ready to snap. Riggs gave a sharp nod, breaking the silence. They're within range, Captain. Area rubbed her hands together, a gleam in her eye. All right, let's see how the coalition appreciates a little Earth culture. Mako punched the final command into her console, and suddenly the bridge was alive with the relentless driving beat of Another One Bites the Dust. The sound, amplified and modified, pulsed outward through the void, a shockwave of rhythm and rebellion. As the music coursed through space, the first coalition ship visibly wobbled, its formation disrupted as though its pilot suddenly forgot how to fly straight. Others soon followed, their neat lines breaking into chaos. Looks like we've hit a nerve, Mako said, her voice triumphant. Area watched with satisfaction as the coalition ships struggled, their systems clearly affected by the unexpected barrage of earthly sound waves. Looks like Queen's got them dancing to a different tune. The comms officer's voice rang out, tinged with awe. Captain, the coalition's communication channels are in disarray. They're scrambling to figure out what's happening. Perfect, Area said, a wicked gleam in her eyes. Let them scramble. We'll keep them guessing. Riggs, though still cautious, couldn't hide his admiration. This might just work, Captain. Of course it will, Area shot back. We're part of Earth's greatest hits, after all. As the coalition ships continued to falter, the crew of the Harmonize rallied, their spirits buoyed by their improbable success. But Area knew it was only a matter of time before the coalition regrouped and posed a formidable threat once again. We need a long-term plan, Riggs reminded her, his voice cutting through the excitement like a cold blade. Area nodded, her mind racing. We keep them at bay with our audio assault long enough for Graviton to fully unravel itself. By the time the coalition figures things out, they'll have bigger problems than us. The crew, invigorated by her determination, set to work with renewed vigor. Each member threw themselves into their tasks, driven by the thrill of defying the odds. As the coalition ships regrouped and began to adapt to the musical interference, Area knew they were running on borrowed time. But if history had taught her anything, it was that sometimes a little chaos was all it took to turn the tide. Let's see if we can keep this dance going a little longer, she said with a devilish grin. Mako, ever the optimist in the face of madness, cracked her knuckles. I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve. How about some Highway to Hell next? Area laughed, the sound a bright spark in the gathering gloom. Perfect choice, she said. Let's show the coalition what an Earth encore looks like. With the music blasting and the universe teetering on the brink of pandemonium, Area and her crew embraced the chaos with open arms. No matter how the cards fell, they knew they'd go down swinging, and of course, with a damn good soundtrack. As the battle raged on, Area couldn't help but think that perhaps Earth's music was exactly what the universe needed, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of space, a little defiance and a lot of rock and roll could go a long way. The coalition might have come for a fight, but the Harmonize had brought a party, and for Area Helix, that was more than enough reason to keep the music playing until the very end. With adrenaline pumping and the speakers blasting, she prepared for whatever came next, ready to face the cosmos with nothing but a song and a smile. As the last notes of Another One Bites the Dust dissolved into the void, Captain Area Helix leaned back in her command chair, the leather creaking in protest, or perhaps in sympathy with the ship's beleaguered audio systems. Well, that bought us a few moments of peace, but we're gonna need more than a classic rock playlist to keep those coalition ships at bay. Mako was already tinkering with another panel, her fingers dancing over the controls like a virtuoso pianist in the middle of a particularly tricky concerto. I've got a few more surprises up my sleeve, but if we're gonna keep blasting tunes like this, we should consider reinforcing the speakers. Otherwise, we might just blow out our own systems before we even make a dent in theirs. Great, Arya said, rubbing her temples. Our weapons of choice are having a midlife crisis. Just what I needed. Across the bridge, Riggs was hunched over his console, frowning as though it had personally insulted him. Captain, I've been monitoring the Coalition's response. They're adapting, recalibrating their systems to filter out the interference. And here I thought space squid weren't supposed to have ears, Mako quipped. Guess I was wrong, Arya sighed, a sound born from equal parts frustration and reluctant admiration. Of course they're adapting. Only thing faster than light in this galaxy is bureaucracy when it wants to ruin your day. Riggs nodded, his expression grim. If they manage to completely filter out the audio interference, we'll lose our advantage. So we need to hit them with something new before they wise up, Arya concluded. Any ideas on how to keep them off balance? A wicked grin spread across Mako's face, the kind that suggested imminent chaos. We could always blend multiple genres. If a single song can shake them, imagine what a medley of Earth's finest could do. Are you sure you're not trying to commit musical murder? Riggs asked, his tone dry as the Martian desert. Arya snorted. Why not? If we're going down, might as well take them with us in a blaze of auditory glory. Just let me know when you've got the next set list ready, Mako. Working on it, Mako replied, already lost in the maze of wires and circuits. Gonna turn this place into the universe's most aggressive DJ booth. Arya turned her attention back to the holographic map, the Coalition blip still hovering uncomfortably close. It was a delicate dance they were performing, and one wrong move could end with them floating in space, the Harmonize a silent testament to human folly. Riggs, how's Graviton holding up? Arya asked, not taking her eyes off the map. Still as moody as ever, Riggs replied, his fingers tapping out a rhythm of their own, but the disruptions are causing it to send out even more scrambled messages. If we can harness that chaos, it might amplify our efforts. So we're using the universe's angriest planet as an amplifier for Earth's greatest hits, Arya chuckled, unable to resist the absurdity of it all. I love it. Let's get to work. Mako emerged from the depths of her console with a triumphant shout. I've got it. A mix of punk rock, opera, and a dash of bagpipes for good measure. Bagpipes? Riggs asked, horrified. Isn't that a bit cruel? Exactly, Mako said with a wicked grin. If they thought Queen was bad, wait till they get a load of this. Arya couldn't help but laugh, a sound that seemed to cut through the tension like a knife through warm butter. All right, let's see how they handle a bit of cultural whiplash. As Mako set about launching their most ambitious auditory assault yet, Arya leaned back in her chair, letting the music wash over her. It was a bizarre, beautiful cacophony, the kind of noise that made your teeth itch and your heart race. The bridge was alive with the sound, a crescendo of chaos that seemed to pulse with every beat of their collective hearts. And for a moment, Arya allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd manage to pull this off. Here they come, Riggs announced, his voice cutting through the din. Coalition ships are moving in, trying to flank us. Time for the encore, Arya said, gesturing for Mako to let loose with their latest audio weapon. Mako hit the switch, and the bridge was filled with the unholy union of bagpipes and punk rock, a sound so aggressive it could have made even the hardest ears bleed. The noise surged out into space, a tidal wave of sound that crashed against the Coalition armada with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The Coalition ships faltered, their formations breaking once more as the unexpected assault overwhelmed their senses. It was a beautiful sight, one that brought a fierce grin to Arya's face. Look at them scramble, Mako said, her voice filled with the kind of satisfaction only a job well done could bring. We've got them on the ropes, but they're not down yet, Riggs warned, his fingers flying over his console as he monitored the Coalition's response. They're adapting faster this time. Then we hit them again, Arya said, her voice steady and sure. We've got to keep them off balance long enough for Graviton to unravel completely. The crew worked with a frenetic energy, each member driven by the urgency of their mission and the knowledge that failure was not an option. It was a delicate balancing act, one wrong note away from disaster, but they were used to dancing on the edge. As the Coalition ships regrouped, their systems slowly adjusting to the new auditory onslaught, Arya knew they were running out of time. They needed something big, something bold to keep the enemy at bay. Riggs, any word from Graviton? Arya asked, hoping for a miracle. Riggs shook his head, his expression grim. Still sending out scrambled messages, but they're becoming more frequent. It's like watching a breakdown in slow motion. Perfect, Arya muttered. We've got a planet throwing a tantrum and an armada breathing down our necks. Just another day in the office. Mako chuckled, a dark sound that matched the mood. At least it's never boring. Got any other brilliant ideas, Captain? Arya considered their options, searching for a solution that didn't end with them as cosmic debris. We need to combine our efforts, use Graviton's disruptions as a force multiplier for our music. Riggs frowned, the gears turning in his mind. If we could sync up our broadcasts with Graviton's frequency, we might be able to amplify the effect. But how do we do that without frying our own systems? Mako asked, her skepticism apparent. Carefully, Arya replied, a mischievous glint in her eye. And with a bit of luck, Mako grinned, already setting to work. I'll get started on the modifications. If we're going out, we might as well do it in style. As the crew prepared for one final gamble, Arya couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie and determination that transcended their dire circumstances. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, a ragtag band of misfits with nothing but their wits and a killer soundtrack. The modifications were completed in record time, the bridge buzzing with a nervous energy as they prepared to unleash their next assault. This was it, their last chance to turn the tide. Arya took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. All right, let's show them what Earth's really made of. With a nod from Mako, she activated the broadcast, a symphony of sound and chaos that surged out into the void. It was a cacophony of Earth's finest, a blend of genres and styles that defied convention and challenged the very fabric of space and time. The Coalition ships hesitated, their systems struggling to make sense of the unholy racket that assaulted them from all sides. It was a beautiful sight, one that filled the crew with a fierce sense of hope. Looks like they're having a bit of a meltdown, Mako said, her voice filled with triumph. Riggs nodded, his expression one of cautious optimism. Graviton's disruptions are amplifying our signals. It's overwhelming their systems faster than they can adapt. Arya couldn't help but smile, a feeling of triumph welling up within her. Let's keep it up. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've got a fighting chance. As the musical barrage continued, the Coalition ships began to falter, their formations breaking as they struggled to regain control. It was a sight that brought a fierce grin to Arya's face, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and defiance. But even as they celebrated their success, Arya knew it was only a matter of time before the Coalition regrouped and posed a formidable threat once again. They needed a plan, a way to keep the enemy at bay long enough for Graviton to unravel completely. We need to keep them distracted, Riggs said, his voice cutting through the chaos. If they managed to shut down Graviton's disruptions, we're finished. Arya nodded, her mind racing as she considered their options. Then we give them something else to worry about. Mako, see if you can rig up some visual interference to go along with the audio. Mako grinned, already hard at work. You got it, Captain. Let's give them a show they won't forget. As the crew prepared for their next move, Arya felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. It was a long shot, a gamble that could end in disaster, but it was the only chance they had. With the Coalition ships still reeling from the auditory assault, the crew launched their next attack, a dazzling display of light and sound that filled the void with chaos and confusion. The bridge was alive with energy, the crew working in perfect concert as they fought to keep the enemy at bay. It was a dance of defiance, a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. As the battle raged on, Arya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and camaraderie that transcended their dire circumstances. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, a ragtag band of misfits with nothing but their wits and a killer soundtrack. We're not out of this yet, Arya said, her voice filled with determination. But if we're going down swinging. With the Coalition armada still looming and the universe teetering on the brink of chaos, Arya and her crew embraced the uncertainty with open arms. No matter how the cards fell, they knew they'd go down fighting, and of course with a damn good soundtrack. The bridge of the Harmonize was as tense as a space squid in a frying pan. Arya Helix stood at the center, trying to muster a confidence she wasn't entirely sure she felt. The Coalition armada, a swarm of metallic locusts, was closing in faster than a debt collector on payday. Their initial musical assault had them on the back foot, but the respite was temporary. Like all good parties, it wouldn't last long. Riggs, what's the status on the Coalition's countermeasures? Arya asked, her voice a blend of authority and caffeine withdrawal. Riggs, ever the picture of a malfunctioning android who thought he was human, didn't look up from his console. They're adapting, faster than a politician at a bribe buffet. Their systems are filtering the audio interference, and they've started deploying jamming signals of their own. Great, so it's devolved into a sonic pissing contest, Arya muttered. Is it too late to play dead and hope they ignore us? Mako snorted, fiddling with the mass of wires and gadgets that made up her console. Playing dead only works for possums and lazy husbands. Besides, I doubt they'll buy it, not unless we paint the ship's hull with free beer signs in big, friendly letters, added Riggs, clearly having an off day when it came to optimism. Arya sighed, rubbing her temples. All right, folks, if they're not falling for Grandma's mixtape, we need something else. Suggestions, Mako perked up, a mischievous glint in her eye. What if we give them the visual equivalent of a brain freeze? We could use the holographic projectors to send them some, creative distractions, like a cosmic Rorschach test for the criminally insane, Arya asked. Exactly. If they're seeing flying pink elephants and naked politicians, they might be too busy losing their lunch to continue attacking, Mako said with a grin that promised all sorts of chaos. All right, do it, Arya decided. Riggs, keep monitoring Graviton. If that planet gets any more neurotic, I want to know so we can send it some therapy sessions post-haste. Got it, Riggs replied, his fingers a blur over the console. Also, I believe Graviton's current mood can be described as existential crisis wrapped in an enigma and dipped in dread. Sounds like my last relationship, Mako chipped in. Arya chuckled despite herself. Great. You've got a planet going through its midlife crisis, and a fleet hellbent on scrubbing Earth's greatest hits from the universe. Just another Tuesday. The bridge was a flurry of activity, as the crew worked to outwit an enemy that was adapting faster than a teenager with a new phone. Arya leaned on her console, eyes fixed on the holographic display tracking the coalition ships. Time to give them a light show they won't forget, she said. Mako tapped a series of commands into her console, and the projectors blinked to life, casting surreal and disorienting images into the void. The coalition ships shuddered to a halt, momentarily stunned by the sudden onslaught of visual madness. Well, would you look at that? They're choking on their own optics, Mako exclaimed, satisfaction dripping from her words. Arya watched the display with a wry smile. Guess they didn't see that coming. The holographic chaos flickered and danced, a maddening show that threw the coalition ships into disarray. It was a small victory, a pause in the chaos, but Arya knew it wouldn't last. The coalition wasn't known for backing down easily. They were like that annoying relative who wouldn't leave after a dinner party, no matter how many times you yawned. Riggs, any sign they're backing off? Arya asked. Riggs shook his head, his expression as dire as ever. Negative. They're recalibrating their sensors. It's only a matter of time before they push forward. Then we're going to need a plan C, Arya said, racking her brain for something, anything, to keep them from becoming space dust. Mako, what else can we throw at them, short of sending them a formal invitation to bugger off? Not much, Mako replied, not missing a beat. But we could try combining another round of audio with the visuals. Maybe give them the full multimedia meltdown. Arya nodded slowly. Right, let's hit them with everything we've got. We need to keep them off balance long enough to figure out how to harness Graviton's chaos. Speaking of which, Riggs cut in, Graviton's starting to broadcast more frequently. If we sync up with its transmissions, we might just overwhelm their systems, or blow Ayers up in the process, Mako pointed out, ever the realist. It's a risk we'll have to take, Arya said, her resolve hardening. Start working on it. Use whatever duct tape and chewing gum you need to make it happen. As Mako set to work, Arya turned her attention back to the display. The coalition ships began to regroup, slowly but surely inching forward, their formation a testament to military precision and stubbornness. All right, team, let's give them a fight they won't forget, Arya said, her voice carrying a note of defiance. The crew sprang into action, each member a cog in a well-oiled machine fueled by desperation and determination. It was do or die, and Arya planned to do plenty before the universe forced her hand. The next attack was a symphony of insanity, a blend of sound and light that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of space. Coalition ships staggered under the assault, their systems struggling to withstand the relentless barrage. Keep it up, Arya urged, watching as the enemy's progress faltered. If we can hold them just a little longer, we might just pull this off. But even as they fought, Arya knew it was only a matter of time before the coalition adapted again. They needed a miracle, a stroke of genius, or at the very least, a really big explosion. Any chance we can just blow them up? Mako asked, ever the optimist when it came to explosive solutions. Not unless you've got a spare nuke tucked away somewhere, Arya replied dryly. And if you do, I'm going to be very impressed and slightly concerned. Sorry, fresh out, Mako said with a laugh. But I've got an idea that might just do the trick. Oh, this should be good, Riggs muttered. Remember that old Earth tradition of fireworks? Mako continued, ignoring Riggs' commentary. We could rig the escape pods to eject and detonate with a light show bright enough to blind them. Arya considered it, a smile slowly spreading across her face. You're crazy. But it might just be crazy enough to work. Crazy's what we do best, Mako replied, already moving to implement her plan. With a few deft keystrokes, Mako set the escape pods to eject and detonate in a blaze of glory. It was a gamble, a wild card in a hand that was running out of options, but if it gave them a few more minutes, it would be worth it. Pods are ready, Mako announced, her fingers hovering over the activation switch. Just say the word, Arya nodded, her heart pounding. Do it. The pods shot from the ship, streaking through space like shooting stars on a collision course with destiny. They erupted in a magnificent display of fire and light, blinding the coalition ships and sending them into chaos once more. Looks like they didn't see that one coming either, Mako said, an edge of pride in her voice. Temporarily blinded but not beaten, Riggs warned. We've bought ourselves a few more minutes, but not much more. Then let's make the most of it, Arya said, determination etched into every line of her face. The crew worked with renewed vigor, a battle against time and an enemy that refused to yield. It was the stuff of legends, or at least one hell of a footnote in the annals of human defiance. As the Coalition struggled with their temporarily crippled systems, Arya knew they had one last card to play. If they could sync with Graviton's disruptions, amplify them with their own broadcasts, they might just overwhelm the enemy's defenses for good. Riggs, how's the synchronization going? Arya asked, her gaze fixed on the holographic display. It's tricky, like trying to play chess with a rabid ferret, but I'm close, Riggs replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. Let me know the moment it's ready, Arya said, determination burning in her eyes. Mako was a blur of motion, her hands dancing over controls with the grace of a seasoned conductor leading a symphony of destruction. We're ready to go when you are. Captain. Arya took a moment to steady herself. This was it, their last stand, their final attempt to hold off the Coalition long enough for Graviton to do the rest. It was a shot in the dark, but it was all they had. Let's do this, Arya said, her voice carrying the weight of command and the fire of defiance. With a nod from Riggs, she activated the transmission, a cacophony of sound that merged with Graviton's own disruptions. The universe seemed to tremble under the combined assault, a storm of chaos that threatened to consume everything in its path. Looks like we've got their attention, Mako said, her grin as fierce as a shark's. The Coalition ships staggered under the onslaught, their systems overwhelmed by the relentless barrage. It was a beautiful sight, a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. Keep it up, Arya urged, her heart pounding with adrenaline. We're almost there. As the battle raged on, Arya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her crew, a ragtag band of misfits who refused to back down in the face of insurmountable odds. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were far from outmatched. With each passing second, the Coalition's grip on the battle weakened, their systems unable to cope with the chaos unleashed by Graviton and the Harmonize. It was a victory hard-won and far from certain, but it was a victory nonetheless. We might just make it, Riggs said, a rare note of optimism in his voice. Damn right we will, Arya replied, her eyes alight with determination. As the Coalition ships faltered, their formations crumbling under the relentless assault, Arya knew they had bought themselves a chance. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was enough to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward in the face of impossible odds. With the universe teetering on the brink of chaos, Arya and her crew embraced the challenge with open arms. No matter how the cards fell, they knew they'd go down fighting, and of course with a damn good soundtrack. The bridge, usually a cacophony of screams and cries for help, had gone eerily quiet, too quiet for Arya Helix's liking, and that was saying something. She'd take the cacophony any day over the silence that signaled something had gone to hell. The Harmonize was limping, trailing smoke like the universe's saddest comet. Somewhere in the ship, vital systems were flashing red, screeching for attention. The kind of red that made you wonder if even the color had given up. Not exactly our finest Ior, Mako muttered, fingers still dancing over her console in a desperate bid to keep everything from disintegrating into cosmic soup. Understatement of the century, Arya replied. She stared at the flickering holographic display, heart heavy as she watched the Coalition's ships regroup, their formation tightening like a noose around a condemned neck. We're gonna need more than fireworks and fancy light shows to get out of this one. Well, we're fresh out of miracles, Riggs chimed in, his tone as chipper as a gravestone. Unless you can pull one out of your proverbial hat, Captain. You sure you're not a malfunctioning android? Arya quipped, trying to ignore the sinking feeling clawing at her insides. Riggs shrugged, or at least attempted to. It was the kind of shrug that suggested he might not have been built to understand human nuance, or maybe he just didn't care. Guess we'll find out soon enough. Great. Just what I needed, an existential crisis on top of a crisis. Arya sighed, rubbing at her temples. There's got to be something we're missing. Besides a functional ship, Mako added, not bothering to look up from the mess of cables and circuits she was attempting to coax into doing something useful. Yeah, Arya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Besides that, for a moment, it seemed the only thing holding the Harmonize together was the collective willpower of its crew, and perhaps a few well-placed pieces of duct tape and sheer bloody-mindedness. Arya glanced around, taking in the weary faces of her crew, each one etched with the marks of the battle they fought so hard to survive. It was a ragtag group, to be sure, but they were her ragtag group, and they'd come too far to go quietly into whatever void awaited them. Mako, what's the status on our communications array? Arya asked, clinging to the slimmest hope of finding some ingenious way to weaponize the universe's most beloved form of torture, music. Still dodgy, Mako replied, wiping a streak of grease from her cheek with the back of her hand. But if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, it just might work. Desperate times, desperate measures, Arya said, her voice infused with a resolve that she didn't entirely feel. If we can't drown them in chaos, maybe we can drown them in culture. Riggs raised an eyebrow, which, coming from him, was practically a standing ovation. Isn't Earth music what got us into this mess? Yes, Arya replied, a wry smile creeping onto her lips, but we're going to use it differently this time. Less cacophony, more harmony. Sure, Riggs said, deadpan. We'll just ask the Coalition to have a nice cup of tea and listen to some soothing tones while they're blowing us to bits. Stranger things have happened, Mako interjected. Remember when we convinced those pirates to back off with nothing but a well-timed fart joke? It's a long shot, Arya admitted, but it's better than doing nothing. With a renewed sense of urgency, the crew turned their attention to the task at hand. Arya watched as Mako patched into the communications system, fingers working at a speed that would have impressed even the most caffeinated octopus. Riggs, meanwhile, was busy syncing the audio systems to Graviton's scrambled transmissions, an intricate dance of wires and code that was equal parts genius and madness. Might want to start with something subtle, Mako suggested as she plugged in the final connection. Don't want to blow their ears off before they get a chance to hear the message. Subtlety, Arya said, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Just what we're known for. The ship's speakers crackled to life, a sound reminiscent of a dying banshee's last attempt at a ballad. It wasn't pretty, but it was a start. The crew worked in unison, coordinating the output so that it blended with Graviton's natural frequencies. It was a symphony of sound and chaos, a beautiful disaster that captured the essence of the human spirit, stubborn, relentless, and just a little bit insane. As the first notes of Earth's music filtered through the ether, the Coalition's ships slowed, their deadly advance faltering. It was as if they'd been caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the harmonized gambit. Looks like we hit a nerve, Mako observed, satisfaction lacing her words. Or maybe they just really hate our taste in music, Riggs added, ever the cynic. Doesn't matter, Arya said, her voice filled with newfound determination. Let's keep them guessing. For what felt like an eternity, the Harmonize held its ground, its crew united in their defiance against an enemy that seemed determined to snuff them out. The music wove its way through the void, a testament to humanity's refusal to be silenced, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And then, without warning, the Coalition's ships began to falter, their formations collapsing under the weight of their own confusion. It was as if the music had reached inside and flipped some existential switch, throwing their systems into disarray. We're doing it, Riggs said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Damn right we are, Mako replied, a grin spreading across her face. Arya watched in awe as the Coalition ships struggled to maintain their cohesion, their ranks breaking apart like a poorly constructed house of cards. It was a beautiful sight, a fleeting victory that spoke volumes about the power of human ingenuity and humanity's knack for chaos. All right, team, Arya said, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and relief. Let's keep up the pressure. They've got nothing on us now. The crew worked with renewed vigor, their spirits lifted by the unexpected turn of events. It was a battle of wits and willpower, and the Harmonize was holding its own. As the Coalition's ships continued to falter, Arya couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. They'd taken on an impossible challenge and found a way to emerge victorious, even if only for a moment. It was a reminder that sometimes, when all seemed lost, the simplest solutions were the most effective. But even as they relished the victory, Arya knew they couldn't let their guard down. The Coalition was nothing if not persistent, and it was only a matter of time before they adapted once more. Keep an eye on their movements, Arya instructed, her gaze fixed on the display. We can't afford any surprises. Copy that, Riggs replied, his fingers flying over the controls with practiced precision. Mako, for her part, was busy fine-tuning the harmonics, adjusting the frequencies to ensure maximum impact. It was a delicate balance, one that required equal parts finesse and brute force. Think they'll ever learn to appreciate good music? Mako asked, a hint of mischief in her voice. Doubt it, Arya replied, but as long as it keeps them off our backs, I won't complain. For a moment, the bridge was filled with the sound of laughter, a brief reprieve from the chaos that surrounded them. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always room for a little levity. As the crew continued their work, Arya felt a renewed sense of hope. They'd faced the impossible and found a way to fight back, proving once again that humanity was far from finished. It was a testament to their resilience, their determination, and their refusal to back down in the face of insurmountable odds. And as the Coalition ships continued to retreat, Arya knew that they had bought themselves some much-needed time. It wasn't a permanent victory, but it was enough to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward until they found a way to turn the tide for good. With the universe on the brink of chaos, Arya and her crew embraced the challenge with open arms. They'd come too far to give up now, and they were determined to see it through to the end. As the battle raged on, Area Helix stood at the center of the bridge, a symbol of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. And as the Harmonize continued its fight, she knew that they were far from alone. Together, they would find a way to triumph, no matter what the cost. For in the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that even the smallest voice could make a difference in the vastness of the universe. And as the notes of Earth's music continued to echo through the void, Area knew that their fight was far from over. But for now, at least, they had earned a moment of peace. The bridge of the Harmonize was still a mess, but it was their mess. And for now, it was a mess that had the upper hand, if you squinted and tilted your head just right. Captain Area Helix, standing at the center of this chaos, wore a grin that suggested she was either about to win or die laughing, possibly both. The Coalition's ships, those sleek bastards, were still hanging around like a bad smell, but their formation was shaky at best, like a drunk trying to line dance. The music was getting to them, and Area could practically taste the confusion. "Keep it going, Mako," Area said, nodding at the engineer whose hands moved like a magician's over the controls. Mako flashed a wicked smile. "I'm gonna make them love Earth music if it kills them, or us, whichever comes first." Area glanced over at Riggs, who was tapping away on a console like he was trying to send an SOS to an imaginary friend. "Riggs, how's our little symphony of terror doing?" "Not bad, Cap. They're squirming more than a worm on a hot sidewalk," Riggs replied, his voice as dry as a desert in a drought. "Let's keep them dancing," Area said, her voice a cocktail of sarcasm and steel. She knew their luck was as fragile as a soap bubble in a hurricane, but she'd take what she could get. In the background, the speakers continued to blare out Earth classics, with Graviton's bizarre signals woven in like a particularly adventurous remix. It was the kind of music that would make Beethoven spin in his grave like a record on a turntable. "How's our hull doing?" Area asked, glancing at Mako as she fiddled with a particularly stubborn wire. "Like a sieve with delusions of grandeur," Mako replied with a shrug. "But she's holding more duct tape than metal at this point." "Great. Nothing like sailing through the galaxy in a flying patchwork quilt," Area quipped, though she couldn't deny the pride bubbling up at the sight of her crew. They were as battered as the ship, but they were holding strong. Out in the void, the Coalition's ships seemed to be regrouping, their movements less erratic, more focused. It was as if they had collectively decided they were done with the Harmonize impromptu concert. "Looks like they're getting their act together," Riggs observed, his tone suggesting this was about as welcome as a cold shower. "Ah, the joys of competent enemies," Mako chimed in. "Always ruining a good party." Area rubbed her chin, staring at the holographic display that showed the Coalition ships inching closer, like a predator sizing up its prey. "All right, ideas, because I'm fresh out of miracles. Could try cranking the volume up," Mako suggested, a glint of mischief in her eye. "Deafen him into submission. Risky, but we're not exactly swimming in options," Area replied, weighing the idea. It was the equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight and hoping your opponent slipped on it. Riggs nodded, his face betraying as much emotion as a granite statue. "Worth a shot. Plus, it'll give us an excuse to break out the earplugs." "Okay then," Area decided, feeling a reckless sort of courage surge through her. "Let's see if we can give them a taste of real harmony." Mako's fingers danced over the controls, adjusting the frequencies, boosting the output. Meanwhile, Riggs continued his task of keeping Graviton's signals in sync with their musical barrage. "Ready, Captain," Mako announced, her voice taut with anticipation. "Do it," Area commanded. The ship's speakers roared to life, unleashing a cacophony that was half symphony, half sonic assault. It was the kind of sound that you felt in your bones, rattled your teeth, and made your ancestors roll over in their graves. On the display, the Coalition ships visibly recoiled, like they'd been slapped upside the head with a particularly heavy bass line. Area watched with a grim satisfaction as they scrambled to adjust. "Looks like we've made our point," Riggs commented, his voice the audio equivalent of a smirk. "Never underestimate the power of bad taste," Mako added, grinning ear to ear, but the Coalition was nothing if not persistent. As the minutes ticked by, their ships began to recover, their movements growing more coordinated, more deliberate. "They're adapting again," Riggs said, sounding about as surprised as a man who'd just discovered gravity was still working. "Of course they are," Area muttered, her mind racing for another angle, another trick to pull from her admittedly shallow bag of tricks. "What else can we throw at them?" Mako leaned back, considering the console like it was a particularly challenging crossword puzzle. "We could try mixing in more of Graviton's frequencies, might throw their sensors for a loop." "You think it'll work?" Area asked, not bothering to hide the skepticism in her voice. "About as likely as a snowball's chance in a supernova," Mako admitted, "but when has that ever stopped us?" "Fair point," Area conceded. "Riggs, what do you think?" "Well, considering our choices are slim to none, I'd say we're on the right track," Riggs replied with a shrug. "Let's just hope it doesn't backfire and blow us all to hell." "Ah, Riggs, ever the optimist," Arya said, a humorless chuckle escaping her lips. "All right, let's do this." Once again, the team set about modifying the audio assault, weaving in more of Graviton's eccentric signals in the hopes of creating an even more potent cocktail of confusion. It was a long shot, but long shots were par for the course at this point. As the new mix blared out across the void, Arya watched the coalition ships with bated breath, waiting to see if their gamble would pay off or leave them with nothing but a symphony of regrets. To her surprise, the coalition's formation wavered, their ships faltering as if caught in a web of their own making. The music seemed to be hitting them on a deeper level, reaching into whatever twisted circuitry passed for their minds. "Looks like it's working," Mako said, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. "Don't count your chickens before they hatch," Riggs warned, though even he sounded a little hopeful. "Let's keep them guessing," Arya ordered, her resolve hardening. "Stay on them, keep adjusting. We've got to buy ourselves more time." The crew worked with renewed determination, a frenzied dance of fingers and controls that was as chaotic as it was effective. It was a battle of attrition, a test of endurance against an enemy that refused to back down. Despite the odds, the Harmonize held its ground, standing firm against the coalition's relentless assault. The music continued to pulse through the void, a defiant cry that resonated with the stubborn tenacity of its creators. But Arya knew better than to rest on her laurels. They'd managed to stall the coalition, but it was only a matter of time before they adapted once more. And when they did, the Harmonize would be hard-pressed to hold its own. As the minutes dragged on, Arya's mind raced, searching for the next move in this deadly game of chess. She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride at what they'd accomplished, but she also knew that pride wouldn't save them when the chips were down. "How long do you think we've got?" Arya asked, her voice barely audible over the din of the music. "Not long," Riggs replied, his eyes fixed on the display. "We're running on borrowed time. Then we'll just have to make the most of it," Arya said, determination etched in every syllable. In the end, it was a battle of wills, a contest of resilience against an enemy that seemed as unyielding as the stars. But Arya knew that as long as they had breath in their bodies, they'd keep fighting, keep pushing forward until they found a way to turn the tide for good. Because in the vast, uncaring void of space, the only thing standing between them and oblivion was the strength of their resolve, the power of their defiance. And as the last notes of Earth's music echoed through the cosmos, Arya knew that they would hold the line, no matter what the cost. For now, at least, they had earned a momentary reprieve, a fleeting victory against an enemy that refused to be beaten. And in the quiet aftermath of their latest gambit, Arya allowed herself a moment of hope, a brief flash of belief that they might yet find a way to survive. But the fight was far from over. The coalition would regroup, would adapt, would return with renewed force and determination. And when they did, the Harmonize and its ragtag crew would be waiting, ready to meet them head-on with every ounce of defiance they could muster. Because in this grim, unyielding universe, they'd learned one thing above all else. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about finding a way to live, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And as long as they held on to that, they could endure anything the universe threw their way. The bridge of the Harmonize was as quiet as a tomb, if tombs had garish blinking lights and the low hum of a barely functioning engine. Arya Helix, captain of this glorified space tin can, stood at the center of her chaos kingdom, her face a mask of determination with a side of annoyance. "Okay, crew," she said, the words crisp as a newly minted credit chip. "Time to turn this volume knob to 11 and hope the coalition's got tinnitus." Riggs, her ever-unflappable first officer, smirked faintly. "If they don't now, they will soon." Mako, practically fusing with the control panel from how much time she spent with it, gave a low whistle. "Never thought I'd live to see the day we weaponized Mozart. My old music teacher would have a coronary. Let's hope the coalition has the same reaction," Arya muttered. She nodded to Mako, who began her ritual of button mashing with the enthusiasm of a kid in an arcade. Earth music blared from the ship's speakers, the kind of stuff that would make a jukebox cry for mercy. Out in the void, the coalition ships were a looming wall of doom, like an angry cosmic porcupine. They were regrouping, their formations tightening as if they were finally getting serious about turning the Harmonize into space debris. "Graviton's signals are synced," Riggs reported. His voice was as dry as old toast and twice as comforting. "Let's hope this works, because I don't fancy being coal in the universe's barbecue." "Cheer up, Riggs. At least we'll die with style," Mako quipped, her fingers a blur on the console. Arya rolled her eyes. "I'd like to avoid the dying part, thanks." Style or no style, the music crescendoed, a chaotic blend of Earth classics and Graviton's kaleidoscopic signals. It was the kind of soundscape that would make even the most avant-garde composer weep tears of pure confusion. The coalition ships responded like they'd been slapped with a wet dictionary. Their formations wavered, ships veering off course like drunken sailors on shore leave. The music was hammering into their systems, a relentless barrage that made their circuits fritz and spark. "Looks like they're feeling the heat," Mako said, watching the display with a grin. "Can't handle the classics, huh?" Riggs added with a chuckle that sounded more like gravel being ground underfoot. But Arya wasn't about to start counting victories before the war was over. Don't get too comfortable. They've got more tricks up their sleeve than a magician on caffeine. True, but at least we're buying ourselves some breathing room, Riggs said, his eyes glued to the screen. And maybe a shot at pulling a rabbit out of our own hat. The coalition ships were faltering, their movements growing erratic. Arya couldn't help feeling a thrill of wicked satisfaction. They'd thrown everything they had into this gamble, and for once the universe seemed to be smiling on them. "Keep it up," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been pushed to the edge and found a way back. "Let's see if we can make them dance the whole damn jig." Mako nodded, her eyes gleaming with fierce determination. "On it, Captain," who knew revolution could be so. Symphonic, the audio assault continued, a relentless barrage of sound that pounded into the coalition ships with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Arya couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction as their enemies scrambled, struggling to adapt to the new onslaught. "Graviton's signals are doing a number on them," Riggs observed, a rare note of admiration in his voice. "Guess the universe's neurotic cousin has its uses. Yeah, who'd have thought we'd be saved by a planet with the temperament of a caffeinated squirt?" Arya replied, unable to suppress a chuckle. Outside, the coalition's lines were breaking, their ships scattering like leaves in a gale. The symphonic assault was overwhelming them, a storm of sound that battered and bewildered their senses. "Captain, they're pulling back," Riggs announced, barely able to keep the surprise out of his voice. Arya allowed herself a small, victorious smile. "Looks like they can't handle our kind of music after all. Never underestimate the power of a good jam session," Mako chimed in, her grin wide enough to split her face. The coalition ships were retreating, their once imposing presence diminished as they fled back into the void. Arya watched them go with a mix of relief and disbelief. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. "Well," she said, leaning back in her chair with a weary sigh. "That was something." Riggs chuckled, a rare sound that was almost as surprising as the coalition's retreat. "Understatement of the millennium, Captain." Mako let out a low whistle, wiping imaginary sweat from her brow. "Remind me to never doubt the power of Earth music again, though my ears might never forgive me." Arya couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the past ires finally breaking. "Let's just hope the coalition learned their lesson. I don't fancy repeating this performance anytime soon." The crew shared a moment of camaraderie, united by their hard-won victory. They'd faced overwhelming odds and come out on top, a ragtag band of survivors who'd managed to defy the universe one more time. But as Arya looked out into the vast, uncaring void, she knew this was just one battle in an unending war. The coalition would regroup, would come back stronger, and they'd need to be ready when they did. "We'll have to keep on our toes," she said, her voice firm but laced with a hint of weary resolve. "They're not going to let us off that easy." Riggs nodded, his expression as serious as ever. "True enough, Captain, but at least we've shown them we're not to be trifled with." Mako stretched, cracking her knuckles with a satisfied grin. "And next time we'll be ready. Maybe with a new playlist." Arya chuckled, feeling a flicker of hope for the future. They'd survived this round, and for now that was enough. They'd keep fighting, keep defying the odds, and maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to carve out a future in this harsh universe. "All right, let's get the ship back in shape," Arya ordered, her voice carrying the authority of one who'd been through hell and come out stronger. "We've got a long way to go, and I don't fancy drifting through space on fumes." The crew got to work, their movements a well-oiled machine forged through countless trials and tribulations. They were tired, battered, but unbeaten. And as Arya watched them, she felt a surge of pride. In this grim, uncaring universe, they'd learned to endure, and as long as they had each other, they'd find a way to survive. The Harmonize might be a flying patchwork quilt, but it was their quilt, and for Arya Helix that was more than enough. They'd faced the music and lived to tell the tale. Now it was time to prepare for whatever came next, because in the end it wasn't just about surviving, it was about living, laughing in the face of adversity, and finding a way to carry on no matter what. With a final glance at the retreating coalition ships, Arya turned her focus back to her crew. They had a long road ahead, but they were ready for the challenge. After all, they'd faced the worst the universe could throw at them and come out on top. What was a few more bumps along the way? And as the Harmonize sailed through the void, trailing smoke and victory, Arya allowed herself a moment of hope. They'd defied the odds once. Who was to say they couldn't do it again? The Harmonize limped through space, trailing more smoke than a disgruntled teenager sneaking a cigarette behind the school gym. Inside, the crew basked in the aftermath of their unlikely victory, the kind of miracle that would make a deity question their own competency. Arya Helix, captain and chief miracle worker, lounged in her chair like a queen on a patched-up throne. Well, folks, she said, voice carrying the weight of someone who'd laughed in the face of death and found the punchline. We turned a cosmic suicide mission into a dance party, and we're still here to complain about it. Mako, the engineer whose hands were permanently stained a shade of engine grease that defied the spectrum, was at the control panel, tweaking dials with an enthusiasm that bordered on religious fervor. I mean, I always said music was therapeutic, but I didn't expect it to be a cure for interstellar invasions. Riggs, the first officer with the emotional range of a slightly damp towel, looked up from his terminal. I guess we made believers out of them. Nothing like a good jam session to send the bad guys packing. Probably more about giving them a headache than inspiring spiritual enlightenment, Arya replied, smirking. But hey, whatever works. Outside, the coalition ships were mere specks, retreating with the urgency of someone who'd just remembered they left the oven on at home. It was a sight that filled Arya with a particular sense of satisfaction, a rare, warm feeling in a universe that seemed to have it out for them. Mako leaned back, stretching her arms. Maybe they'll add Avoid Earth's greatest hits to their tactical manuals. Yeah, I'm sure Beethoven's Fifth will be classified as a weapon of mass destruction, Riggs said dryly, typing away, as though the universe's survival depended on his ability to ignore everyone. The bridge door hissed open, and in strolled Graviton's holographic avatar, a swirl of colors and patterns that suggested someone had given an AI a paintbrush and a lot of coffee. Its voice, a blend of curiosity and disdain, echoed around the room. Congratulations, Captain. You have achieved what many thought impossible. You've weaponized your planet's cultural detritus. Well, Arya said, raising an eyebrow at the swirling mass. It's not like we had a lot of options. When life's a cosmic joke, sometimes you've got to laugh along, or blast your enemies with musical diarrhea, Mako added, grinning. Graviton made a sound that might have been a chuckle if planets could chuckle. Indeed, the Coalition has requested a discussion. They wish to avoid further exposure to your auditory arsenal. Riggs looked up, his expression as unimpressed as ever. So they're waving the white flag, or is this one of those let's be civilized before we blow up your planet talks? An armistice, they called it, Graviton replied. They wish to discuss terms. Arya exchanged a glance with Riggs and Mako, her skepticism palpable. And we're supposed to believe this isn't a ruse. Desperation makes even the most stalwart enemies rethink their strategies, Graviton said, voice carrying a hint of cosmic amusement. It appears your unexpected cultural prowess has given them pause. Great, Mako said, rolling her eyes. Our legacy, the species that beat them back with pop culture and bad taste, Riggs shrugged, could be worse. We could be remembered for inventing the Kardashians. Arya sighed, leaning back in her chair. All right, let's see what they have to say. Maybe they're finally realizing that exterminating a species that can dance them to death isn't worth the trouble. Graviton's avatar flickered, shifting patterns like a kaleidoscope on speed. Shall I initiate contact, Captain? Go for it, Arya said, trying to ignore the pit of anxiety that gnawed at her insides. Let's hear what our old pals have to say. The holographic display shimmered, and soon the visage of a coalition representative filled the screen, a face like an angry potato with delusions of grandeur. It spoke in a voice that suggested it had been gargling gravel since birth. Captain Helix of the Harmonize, we acknowledge the effectiveness of your recent actions. Call it what it is, Arya replied, leaning forward. You've realized we're more trouble than we're worth. The potato's expression didn't change, which Arya took as a sign of progress. Indeed, we propose a truce, a cessation of hostilities, effective immediately. Mako let out a low whistle. Didn't think I'd live to see the day aliens cried uncle because of classic rock. Arya crossed her arms, skepticism etched into every line of her face. What are the terms? Our primary concern is the preservation of our communication networks, the coalition representative replied. To that end, we propose an exchange of cultural artifacts to better understand one another. Translation, Riggs muttered. They want to make sure they can counter our music next time. Arya didn't disagree. And in return, we will cease all aggressive actions against your vessel and reconsider our stance on your species. Mako snorted. Reconsider. What, like you're going to start a fan club? The representative's expression suggested it found humor as appealing as a root canal. We will reassess the potential threat and contributions of your civilization. Arya considered the offer, weighing the risks versus the benefits. It was a gamble, just like everything else in this God's forsaken universe. But they'd pulled off the impossible once, and maybe, just maybe, they could do it again. Fine, we'll play nice if you do, but make no mistake, we've got more where that came from. The coalition representative nodded, a stiff, awkward motion that suggested grudging respect. Very well, Captain, we shall arrange a formal exchange. The display flickered off, leaving the crew in a contemplative silence. Arya exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. Well, that went better than expected. Not getting vaporized is always a plus, Riggs deadpanned, focusing on his console. Mako stretched, looking like she just won the intergalactic lottery. Guess we'll need to curate the playlist for this cultural exchange. Maybe throw in some death metal just to keep them on their toes. Good idea, Arya said, smirking. Let's show them the whole spectrum of humanity's musical genius, or lack thereof. As the crew settled back into their routines, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They'd survived another day, another cosmic joke at their expense, and come out laughing. And in this universe, that was no small feat. Graviton continued to hover near the console, a shimmering reminder of their strange ally. You have done well, Captain. The Coalition's retreat is a testament to your ingenuity. And sheer dumb luck, Arya added. Never underestimate the power of a good bluff. The planet's avatar pulsed, a ripple of colors that suggested amusement. Indeed, but it is your resilience that has proven most formidable. You have adapted, survived, and outwitted adversaries far beyond your technological capabilities, all because we know how to play a mean air guitar, Mako said, chuckling. Arya nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Let's hope the universe keeps underestimating us. Gives us a fighting chance. Outside, the stars continued their indifferent dance, a cosmic ballet that paid no mind to the struggles of one small ship and its ragtag crew. But for Arya Helix, captain of the Harmonize, it was enough. They'd faced the darkness and found a way to shine. All right, team, she said, rising from her chair with renewed determination. Let's patch up this floating hunk of junk and get ready for whatever comes next. We've got a universe to annoy. Mako saluted with mock seriousness. Aye, Captain, one annoyance at a time. The crew shared a laugh, their camaraderie a force as tangible as the stars outside. They'd proven that in a universe that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out, they could still find a way to endure, to thrive, and most importantly, to laugh. As the Harmonize continued its journey, a beacon of resilience in the vastness of space, Arya felt a flicker of hope. They'd survived against all odds, and while the future remained uncertain, they'd face it together. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, defying the odds, and finding joy amidst the chaos. And maybe, just maybe, they'd make the universe a little louder, a little brighter, and a lot more entertaining in the process.